Untamed. We've got a great show coming up. Thank you for watching. It was really kind of no set topic, and I guess the gods smiled upon us and said, "Well, here is a topic." And what could that topic be? Well, it's going to sound a little absurd to everyone who was born yesterday, but Epstein had no client list, and he killed himself. And I saw my buddy in the parking garage this morning. And he goes, "What do you make of that?" And I go, "Trump's involved." And he goes, "There's literally no other answer." And I go, "Yeah, anything else is 5D chess." But because we have John Cullen here, who is the chess master at 5D chess, some would call it autism. I call it your best strength. We're gonna go into what could possibly be the answer, and I'll shut up after this, but I'll put forward my best running thesis so far is that when Elon left Doge saying that the budget was too fucked and it couldn't be fixed, it sounds kind of absurd that the richest man in the world couldn't balance a budget. And then he comes out and says Trump was on the Epstein client list. You only say that if you're certain you're not on it. And then three, the creation of the American Party. I don't think he was talking about the budget. I think he was saying it is a viper infested porta potty, and that's what he did. And so the plot thickens. But for everybody listening, please go in the description. Please go follow John and EM both on Twitter. You can find John's YouTube and his Subscribe Star and his Patreon. You can find EM's YouTube and his Twitter. I'm gonna shut up, and EM, I'm gonna hand it to John first because he's the wizard at this stuff.
Yeah.
The truth is with this Epstein stuff, I'm probably not as I don't bring as much to the table on this story as maybe EM does. So, there's certain aspects of it that I have opinions on, but my strength tends to be more, looking for little dots of light, looking for stuff in videos and photographs and ballistic calculations and audio calculations, crack thump type stuff. When you start getting into this, manipulation of people and personalities and the public's perception of what's going on, I think you've stepped into EM's world. I mean, this is you were trained how to do this stuff. And for the people who aren't familiar, I mean, there may be people watching the show, Tommy, that follow you and are familiar with my stuff, but are not familiar with EM's background and the stuff that you used to do. I mean, you're professionally trained on this stuff. So, I mean, for people who aren't familiar with that, can you tell people, I mean, give people the Wikipedia, what's the top paragraph say about you on Wikipedia? I mean, so that people who aren't familiar with your background know, oh, wow, okay, I see what John's talking about here.
Yeah. So before I went into Special Forces and became a targeting guy in Asia with the CIF, Commanders in Extremis Force.
So hang on, before you even go past that, many people are like, what? What was that? So, whoa, hold on.
I'll get to that. Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. So before that, I had spent a good 15 years as a financial analyst, heavily focused on, capital flows, cross-border capital flows, and deals and transactions in telecommunications, digital media, and infrastructure. Power generation.
But working for Wall Street, though, talking about Wall Street, you weren't working
investment banks. Yeah.
All right, so
investment banks, private equity, venture capital.
Right.
I was the one figuring out, where's the fraud in this deal? Because 90% of the deals I've looked at, probably more, have had at least some part of fraud in them. If not, were unbelievably sophisticated kinds of frauds carried on by major banks, major corporations, high net worth individuals, et cetera. Right. So I had done that for 10, 15 years before I went in to have my midlife crisis and went in, became a Green Beret, and then went out to the Commanders in Extremis Force, which is, JSOC Light, the JV League for JSOC. We're the ones that do, most of the training for JSOC-like activities around the world. In my case, it was South and Southeast Asia.
And for people who don't know what those activities are, what are those activities without giving
direct action, hostage rescue, presidential detail, all of the cordon, like the Butler kind of stuff, but layers and layers deeper when the president travels overseas. Related to all that is the intelligence work necessary to know who's who and who's doing what, where, right down to the smallest little village level, all the way up to the holes of power in these countries. And then the targeting side of the direct action work out in Asia, actually around the world, is heavily focused on how do you identify who's really the bad guys, who's really doing what, who's connected to what in what way. If we wanted to go after somebody and exercise, an individual or a node in a network, not always an individual, how would you do that? All of which has to be done in a very legal, formal structure because you have to have, most people don't know this, but in the targeting world, the O Dark 30 guys didn't just to go kick in the door at midnight somewhere and shoot some people in their bed. There had to be a legal process through the Department of Justice and State Department that authorized, yes, go after this person. Here's the left, right bounds, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot more to it I won't go into. One of the primary things that you want to do, though, is you always want to do an operation in such a way that, one, you get the right person at the right time in the right place in the right way, but that you leave the right signature on it. You make it look like what it needs to look like to drive other things, other events, right? To move other people, to set other things in motion, to shunt other things off from happening, et cetera, et cetera. So I did that for 3 years with C11. And I'll be here later today. Clay Martin's coming over. He's a mutual friend of Tom. Well, actually, I think all three of you guys, both of you guys, all three of us know, but he'll be over. He was in the third group SIF, so the third group sister unit to what I was in Asia. So that was my background. And then I left because, well, I was getting old and divorced and all those things. I went to my doctoral studies in computational engineering and science because I wanted to know where AI was, but also because so much of the intelligence reporting that I was dealing with every day was wrong. And you could see that if you got out of the intelligence world and you looked in financial data and market data, and you could see where companies were and what kind of trades were being put on and in futures and options and everything else, and realize that, hey, these things don't, what the intelligence picture is and what the reality is in the world, those don't match. And as a targeting guy, you had to you had to make it match with reality because you were going to go after somebody. So, all right. So that's in a nutshell. I don't know if that
Well,
kind of
with
gives
that,
you what it
yeah,
is.
but that's the frame. I mean, that's kind of the point here is that when you look at the targeting stuff that you were doing professionally, and
Mhm.
then now you take those skills, that background, that set of training, and you apply it to Epstein Island,
To Epstein Island. But
right?
so I might or might not have crossed paths with Maxwell and Epstein earlier in my financial life because you couldn't play at a certain level of the game and not.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
let me
They were
interject.
there.
Let me
So,
interject. I was gonna say it, and then I decided not to. But after you said that, I have to. One of my favorite quotes ever from this podcast is EM. Uh, after spending decades in finance, I had to join special forces and go kill people to get the bad taste of finance out of my mouth. Sorry, keep going.
it's only a little bit hyperbole. Um, to kill the right people, though,
Yeah.
hopefully. I'm not sure we did that, but yeah, so you couldn't not cross paths with these folks, whether and how I first did is I had a startup company. We needed investment. I was in telecommunications. Epstein was a big investor in telecommunications in the late 90s, early 2000s. Um, and so I, was set up to meet, et cetera. I never really kind of met. There was one introduction somewhere. I recoiled from the guy and walked away, and that was it. I didn't know any, this is early, very early 2000s, so I knew nothing about any of this other stuff and had forgotten all about it till much later. He was one of a group of people, right, potential investors. But point being is that this is a little bit of a side, but many times somebody isn't actually participating in the bad guy's activities. And the bad guy knows that, so they'll get in a photograph with them. They'll go to an event.
Sure.
So now it's guilt by association. And,
Yeah.
how do you disprove a negative?
Mm-hmm.
It's virtually impossible,
We see
right?
there's characters now. So I was doing this podcast with Jason Goodman. He does a lot of stuff on the streets of New York. There are characters that show up at these events, one of whom is called Crackhead Barney. And it's like a woman in a bikini who's about 100 pounds overweight. The bikini's two sizes too small. She's fallen out of it all over the place, and she's just a disaster. But she ends up right next to Zoran Mumbamni or whatever the guy's name is, who's running for mayor of New York and all that. And she ends up in all the photographs. She ends up everywhere, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's like, my God, it's like guilt by association. Boy, I don't even want to be near that woman.
Yeah.
If I saw her on the other side of the street, I'd be running the other way. I mean, get away from me. I don't want to be in a photo with her. So
Yeah. And
yes, I know
it
exactly what you're
happens
talking about.
all
Yeah.
the time, right? If they can't turn you, they can't corrupt you, they're going to dirty the narrative and dialogue around you. Um, Back to the training, right? Back to special and underlying what I did in a certain unit, et cetera, during the ISIS buildup, during the way the ISIS buildup South and Southeast Asia. Um, Underneath that is Green Beret training, a year and a half in the schoolhouse and a year in Afghanistan, and that's unconventional warfare. That's how do you take down a country from the inside with a couple guys. Excuse me. How do you corrupt institutions? How do you do loyalty tests? How do you buy people off? How do and there's all the different ways you do that. It's only a tiny fraction of its blackmail. Most of the power of Epstein, and that's Operation Maxwell Epstein, by the way, because it goes back to Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's father, right? Um, and look at the overlap between Epstein and Bill Barr's family,
Bill
going
Barr's
back to when Bill Barr was in
Bill's
school.
Bill Barr's dad hired Epstein at
Dalton.
yeah.
Dalton. Yeah.
Dalton. So
Epstein's, people forget Epstein was a finance guy. He was a Wall Street fraudster, corrupt dude.
let's talk about that for a second. So for people who don't know, there is a very high-end private school in New York
Yep.
City called Dalton.
Yep.
And you guys can look this up on Wikipedia or whatever, and you'll find names of high-profile people that went to Dalton as an elementary school. I think it
Yeah.
goes maybe
Yeah.
K through high school or something like that.
Mhm.
Very prestigious, very expensive. And to get into Dalton is like, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to send my kid to Dalton." Like, there's like a whole thing to
It's
get
an
in there.
appointment. You're
Bill
appointed.
Barr's
Yeah.
father worked at Dalton. Was he the headmaster?
I
Was Bill
think he
Barr?
was. Yeah.
I think he may have been.
Yeah.
And he hires Jeffrey Epstein to be a teacher, but I don't think Epstein had any credentials to be a
No.
teacher.
No. And I believe it was math. He was very good at math,
Yes.
extraordinarily good at math, and
But
particularly
then he
good
goes to
at,
Bear Stearns, right?
yeah.
He
Yeah.
goes from Dalton being a teacher at Dalton
Yeah.
to working with like the big name guys. Like he's at the
Yeah.
tippy top at Bear Stearns. How
Robert Maxwell, Steve Cohn, right? These are the um, descendants of the Dulles brothers and the others who created the CIA out of the OSS to launder Nazi money. This is a continuation.
And I want to make sure I had this before I said it. Epstein, or not, sorry, Bill Barr's father, Donald Barr, also wrote a book in 1973 called Space Relations about how the elite of a spacefaring civilization
Yes.
have children sex slaves. So just
Yes.
another fun fact we'll just put in the
Yeah.
corner.
Yeah.
Space Relations by Donald Barr, 1973.
Look into the breaking and conditioning of British elites in using sexual abuse in boarding schools in the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
going back a century or more? How do you condition them to be the leaders that you need them to be? And look at Ghislaine and her own relationship with her own father, et cetera. So, all of that is background. Bringing it back to what was Operation Maxwell Epstein, really, because part of the training we take in special forces and in the intelligence world is two things called cover for action and cover for status. And people can look it up, so I'm not giving away any secrets, right? Won't tell you all how we do it sometimes, but cover for action. Okay. If I'm doing something really bad for, genuinely bad, like enslaving human beings, or humanity writ large, or trying to overthrow a country, right? Like as a Green Beret, I'm going to do something that's morally repugnant. So if you ever catch me or arrest me or roll me up, you're going to go after me for that, not what I was actually doing, which was overthrowing your fucking country,
Mm.
right? Called cover for action. What is the cover for what I was doing? And then the other one's cover for status. Why was I connected with that person? Why was I connected to this person? Why was I in this meeting that I have no background or reason to be in? So cover for status, cover for action. Well, the best one, when you are putting in place the infrastructure for the great taking and the great depopulation, which is what Operation Maxwell Epstein is really about, you have to have cover for action and status for putting in place, taking 2 generations to put in place all of the human infrastructure, decision-making infrastructure necessary to make those two things happen on a global scale. That's what that was really about. The whole pedophilia stuff, as horrible as it is, and horrible as it was cover.
For because it wasn't just blackmail, it was also
Blackmail
scientists.
only works in a tiny fraction, by the way.
Well,
Yeah,
not,
terribly
but
sorry. Go
it
ahead.
wasn't
Yeah.
just other people who had power. That's absolutely a facet of it. But I mean, you look at things like his ranch. Dude was all into and associated with eugenics and baby
Genetic
farms, and
studies.
yeah,
He
I mean,
heavily funded what would
So let's talk
become
about that.
mRNA,
All right,
right?
so let's talk about what the real objective of what this guy was doing, right? It's not to get a massage from a 17-year-old Ukrainian blonde. I mean, that's not
Nope.
what it's about.
Nope. That's
That's
cover.
the cover. All right.
Yep.
So now let's talk about what the hell were these guys really up to
So what
and
was his
who's behind all
background?
that, right? And
What was
who's
his
behind.
background going back to Bear Stearns? That's where it starts. And
Okay.
what did he do? Well, did he not put together the Clinton Foundation structure
did he?
financially? Did he not
Did
do
he?
others?
I
Did
didn't.
he? I mean, we know about Lex Wexner and limited
Les
Yeah,
money.
Wexner,
That
right?
cover.
So,
That's more cover for credibility.
so okay. The great taking, it goes way beyond the banks and what the gentleman, I can't remember, I think Tommy, you've had him on, the book he's written, about the banks, et cetera. The great taking is how do you steal the wealth of the world and move it offshore so that it can't be can't be recovered. And that's all sophisticated, complicated stuff that was set in motion in the 1940s. Again, back to Steve Cohen, Robert Maxwell, et cetera. We spent $10 trillion fighting the global war on terror. It's probably more than that. It's probably closer to twice that. Where'd most of that money go? Didn't go back to the countries where it was, taken from in the form of debt, et cetera, went into the spider's web. What were and it paid out all of these people, all this human infrastructure. Here's how you're going to get your piece. What was really underneath and behind what Maxwell Epstein operation, again, going back 2 generations, to her father and her father's individuals who brought him in, Robert Maxwell in and Epstein, is this putting in place this massive theft of the commons infrastructure at the financial level. How does everybody get paid, right down to congressmen and senators and governors and CEOs and just middle management people who have some role somewhere in something, judges, et cetera, right? How does all that get laundered back to through, the Panama Papers, think Panama Papers, all that infrastructure. It's way more sophisticated than that. That's what Epstein's actual expertise was. That's what he did from the beginning. First, what he did at Bear Stearns were schemes, fraud schemes, and he got rousted out of there at some point. But what Epstein was really doing, all the other stuff was cover for people coming that were going to be in the decision-making process or the influence process for the great theft of the commons, which is, running up tens of trillions of dollars of debt that future generations are going to have to pay and laundering 99% of that back to the individual, thousands and thousands of people around the world that were in decision making. All of that then is has to be covered, right? And you got to do massive depopulation because you don't want the population coming after you later once you've done all this theft, right? And they're openly calling for it, right? They've been openly calling for it for since the 1960s. It's all tied together, this great depopulation effort. And how do you mask all of that ultimately? Because it turns out genetic warfare doesn't work. They didn't get anywhere near the results they were expecting from COVID, and more importantly, the vaccines, as horrible as that is. They didn't get anywhere near the results because it turns out genetics aren't as important as we used to think. So how do you mask all of, and then even if that works, how do you mask everything and do the final great taking? You have to have a world war. That's what Operation Maxwell Epstein was putting in place. That's what her father and Steve Cohen and the others, Les Wexman and all of those were putting in place since the 1950s.
So enough leverage that you can basically drive the wedge in and trigger a war.
You have to have, yes. So you have to have enough influence on enough people that they'll go along with the depopulation and the war because they're getting paid out and they think that they're protected in it.
Well, I think we've seen the evidence of that. I mean, for many people, I think it's been a bit of an anathema. Like, why is everybody in Congress keep talking about Israel? Why does everybody keep saying Israel's our most important ally?
Well, what about Ukraine when they did
yeah,
have
yeah. What about
unlimited spending?
Nigeria? We got 225 million people in Nigeria, in the heart of
Yeah,
Africa.
yeah.
What, why isn't Nigeria more? There's 90 million people in Egypt. There's 90 million people in Morocco, and there's 9 million in Israel. It's like New Jersey. It's like, who gives a shit about New Jersey? So yeah, I never quite got it. I was like, why is everybody with the Israel? By the way, on Twitter, it's kind of funny because they kind of blame everything on the Jews on Twitter. And I did a quick search to find out, well, compared to the Hindus, how many Jews are there? There's like 15 or 16 million Jews on Earth, 1.2 billion Hindus, 2 billion Muslims, and 2.4 billion Christians. And I'm like, wow, if the 16 million Jews have figured all this out, you guys all deserve whatever you're getting, because it's not much compared to the Hindus and the Christians and the Muslims. You get 16 million Jews. It's that many.
They're the
So,
whipping boys. They've been the whipping boys in their faith and belief system going back to Egypt. They've been the fall
wow.
guy. It's a
Yeah.
role. So, in anybody, Tommy is a frat guy, right? In every group of friends, every organization, there are people who fill different archetypes.
Right.
And one of those archetypes is the fall guy,
Yep.
is the whipping boy. And I mean, it's in every family, there's somebody who always gets blamed for shit. And you know, if they play it right, they take that role on and they get rewarded for that very well. But every once in a while, they take the blame for shit.
Yeah. On Twitter, they
And
take it quite a bit.
well,
You know,
they do it everything.
pretty
And
well.
unfortunately, their own leadership plays their role very well, and
Indeed.
they are very richly rewarded for that. And when the pogroms happen every several hundred years, they're not, they and their family are not involved in the pogrom.
Well, the nuclearization of Israel seems to be the tipping point, the hot thing. I mean, you've got Iran firing missiles into Israel. You got condominiums. Some of the photographs are kind of spectacular. What happened in Haifa and what have you. And Israel's got nuclear weapons. So, I mean, it's sort of like, well, how much of this do we need to keep doing until Israel deploys a tactical nuke? And I think it
It
was,
won't.
well, but it was Matt Gaetz recently who said, well, why don't we just disarm everybody? In other words, right now, Saudi Arabia wants nukes because Israel's got nukes and Saudi Arabia's playing nice, right? Look how nice Saudi Arabia's playing. They want nukes too.
Okay, so okay, so
Walk
back
us
to
through it.
Operation Maxwell Epstein, right? Okay, everybody's talking about a list. A list, a list, a list. I'm going to tell you right now, right? I wouldn't trust any list that came out of anybody, nowhere, no how at this point, right? I wouldn't even trust court records or any of those things at this point. I don't care how redacted or whatever. At this point, you couldn't trust any of that. There is something, however, I can't trust, and we're actually seeing it. And that is going after the networks, that human infrastructure and financial infrastructure that was put in place to bring about the great the theft of the commons, to then be secured by massive depopulation, all of which to be hidden by world war. That's all being undone. We are impoverishing Europe. We are, and I mean straight up impoverishing Europe, and particularly the city of London. We have disarmed Europe in the Ukrainian war, never giving them enough to actually fight a peer-on-peer war. And God bless the Ukrainians. I gotta give them, man, they've been holding in there at 1.5 million of their own dead, but they're holding in there in a peer-on-peer conflict. And yes, the Russians have been holding back immensely because these are their own people. But I got to give it to the Ukrainians on fighting spirit, right? But they've been used to disarm NATO. That's been done on purpose. Where's the
Depletion of
next, so that we
munitions.
don't have to worry about World War III sparking up or being able to be fought in Europe. Okay, where's the next region where we got massive stockpiles of weapons and arms and intelligence networks and spies and double agents and all of this? The Middle East. So
When
we got
you
to undo that.
when
We
you
got to
say
get
disarm,
them
sorry, when you say disarm, do you mean depletion of munitions
depletion of
or
munitions.
all materiel?
Well, it's okay. So great question. So it's three things. You got to highlight who the real leadership is and what their real intents are by drawing them out. You've got to burn up all of the munitions. I mean, like just burn them to the ground, as many as you freaking can, right? And we can send as much as we want from the United States because it's virtually impossible to invade the United States. We have two massive oceans. I mean, it's virtually impossible. And if we wanted to, we could shut the southern border down easy. And you know how we do that? We invade frickin' Mexico and shut it off at the southern, that narrow little band down by Guatemala and Colombia, right? We just shut that down by taking, well, Panama, et cetera. And Canada, that's easy. That's a weekend with just two or three of my boys and I will take Canada.
You don't even need to do anything.
Little
Just
bit
say
of a
it's
joke,
ours.
but you know why? Because we'll go rolling in there, and the Canadians will be, yeah, fuck, yeah,
Yeah,
about damn
baby
time. But
sites. They want to be. Trust me, they want to be conquered.
yeah, so you gotta draw out who the leadership is and what the real intention is, right? And you do that by feeding them weapons and arms and giving them a sense of overconfidence so that they bring themselves out in the open. All these war hawks in Europe,
And
right?
that's what we
And
did with Ukraine. That's what we just did.
exactly. Now we're shifted to the Middle East because we've got to burn all of, and the third piece is you have to draw out into the open all the covert and clandestine networks and their capabilities. What was that little
Yeah.
pinprick strike on the bombers in Russia? We
Hmm.
gave the go-ahead to an operation that had probably taken 5 years, 15 years really to put together, right? The last year and a half was just how they're going to actually execute, et cetera, using drones. We just call that off. Do you think so we've been seeing little things in the newspaper, right? Or in the news, which I don't have high confidence, but certain high-ranking Russians are now dead.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's not a sorry to keep interrupting. That's not a trivial thing. I was looking at a picture of a B2 last night, just parked on a runway. I'd love the B2. I was just thinking, like, what's the security around that thing at all times? It's not an F-15.
Not very good.
In my mind, I'm just thinking, like, if you're doing a war, that's the first thing you're doing is probably some suicide commando runs on the beach because there's
Yeah.
only like 20 of them.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
nothing that just happened. Sorry, in Russia. Keep going.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So point being is that they burned those intelligence networks to do these operations, the same with the terrorist operations previous, et cetera. So the 3 or 4 operations they've done from within Russia has just highlighted years of intelligence network development and relationships and assets. And now the Russians know exactly where to look, and now it goes from there.
Got it. Right.
Right? Okay. It's what you do, right? It's what,
Yeah.
if you look at the late 1980s, early 1990s, that's what both the US and Russia were doing. They would
Well,
give a little bit of
Israel did it
information.
too. Israel did the same thing with Iran. We just burned a whole bunch of assets.
So now we just
If
shift
Israel
over to the
said,
Middle East. It's
we had
like
a
we
ton
got
of
Europe
guys
done.
inside the Iranian parliament, right?
Exactly. So
But that's burned now. All those
all
assets
burned. It
all
would take
burned.
20 years to probably
And
put
it
it
did
together.
take, right? It probably did take 20 years to get these guys in
Correct.
place.
Correct.
Holy shit.
And we're burning all the arms, all the weapons. Israel's Iron Dome is done. It's depleted. We can't. It would take 5 years to frickin' restore.
So what the fuck's like, then what the fuck's happening? If all these networks are being, this is clearly not accidental. What's the puppet behind the
cupboards
puppet?
are empty, right? The cupboards are empty.
So we've
Nobody's
got
got anything
we got
left.
one more region we got to do though, and look where the
Asia.
conversation's going by this total estrogen laden dude, Ruta, freaking Dutch cunt over in head of NATO.
Yeah.
And I used the word cunt appropriately for that guy. Where's he talking now? China. Yeah, motherfucker, go ahead and go to China. Let's go burn all those networks and assets and bullshit that we were setting up to do, some kind of war there that we could never hope to win.
Oh shit. Taiwan.
Taiwan, Burma,
Taiwan.
Malaysia, all of this. There's been insurgencies that we've been backing and funding and supporting in Malaysia and Thailand that go back 40 years. All that's got to get burnt.
Based on what you just told me, the goosebumps on my arm, the hair on my arm standing up is telling me we're going to trigger the war between Taiwan and China.
Yes.
And we'll make it look like it was China's aggression. Right. Well, but we're going to make it look like it was China's aggression.
Yes.
John just froze up.
It's a good look for him, though.
It is, but he just froze up.
Did I lose you guys?
No, okay, you're back. Yeah.
Yeah. You said we're going to trigger. We're going to make it look like China triggers it,
and then Taiwan hits you. You're still frozen, but we can hear you. You there, John? Well, the Mossad's killed John, so EM and I will continue until he'll come back. It's Zoom. It sucks. It also could very well be. There he is. He's moving around. All right, John, you back? Can you hear us? All right. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, you said the key word. You said something about Taiwan, and they came in.
You said China's going to initiate, and so they froze you. Zoom.
And all of a sudden, it's kind of magical how that stuff happens. It's like
it's less funny as it happens more over the years. The first time it was funny. After like the 10th time over 6 years, you start to go, ooh, I don't like that.
Yeah, it's a little crazy.
So
I don't really like that.
Very much to your point, right?
Right. Come on.
Yeah.
If you're going to stop and prevent the great theft of the commons, which is our economic future, right? Our financial future, and you're going to stop the great depopulation, and you're going to stop World War III, the first thing you have to do is make sure World War III isn't a possibility.
Indeed.
And the only way to do that is to burn all the arms and munitions possible in useless fucking fights and let everybody see and know, we can't actually do this. But more importantly, what you have to do is get those into such a place where they actually burn clandestine and covert networks.
It's exactly what Mika's dad did. This is what Brzezinski did to Russia in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Come through the Khyber Pass for a year and a half, you won't have shit left.
No.
You won't have anything left. Come on through the Khyber Pass.
Brzezinski
and
was
then
brilliant.
Tied into all of that, you have to go after their illicit funding networks. That's the cartels. That's the criminal organizations.
How are they going to do that in China? How are they going to find the Chinese money?
because
That's
it isn't, that's not what we're going after. What we're going after is our own. We're
okay.
going after European, British, and American, Five Eye assets
Woven
that we
into the
put in place.
infrastructures in Hong Kong,
Correct,
Singapore,
correct. Because Russia,
Kuala
China,
Lumpur.
Iran don't want a world war. They're just coming out of collapse. Not Iran, that's a separate,
Hmm.
Persia is a
Hmm.
separate issue. But Russia and China are just coming into their own after being forced to go through communism by us. They don't want a world war.
Hmm. Hmm.
In fact, the only people, so we ought to look historically who are expeditionary peoples and who are not. The only expeditionary, fully on, no shit, globally expeditionary people in the world are all Western Europeans or of
Hmm.
Western European descent
Hmm.
because we're
The
sea
Dutch, the
powers.
Dutch, right? The Dutch, of
Dutch,
course.
the Venetians, the
Hmm.
Romans before all of
Hmm.
that.
Right.
So the first thing, if you're going to stop this great theft of the commons, and you're going to stop the depopulation, and you're going to stop, World War III, you have to start with the World War III capability. And in that, you have to now start, not only disarm, not only draw out into the open or covert and clandestine networks and systems and infrastructure and leaders and relationships and financing. Um, you have to start going after their illicit financing and funding, which is human trafficking, drug trafficking primarily, not exclusively, but primarily. Well, look at who's being rolled up and like the thing in LA was what? That didn't go after illegals. That went after a human trafficking money laundering scheme,
Hmm.
right? And look how
Hmm.
I think we talked this before. Look how
Diddy, the
quick
Diddy thing, the Diddy
Diddy
thing,
thing,
right?
right?
Hmm.
Diddy thing. I'm still trying to.
There was a human trafficking element there,
Oh,
and
it's a huge. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they
Problem is,
mentioned the sheriff. They mentioned this Pelletier guy
yeah,
that was in Vegas that goes to
yeah,
Hawaii, and his
yeah,
name comes up in the Diddy trial. It's like, well,
yeah.
what the hell is this guy getting? And this is
So
trafficking.
that's the other. So once you know that you're pretty confident World War III is not going to happen, and you know that the ultimate fight to stop the great taking, the great depopulation, is going to be at home. You're going to have to go and fight at home, and you know it. That's also why we see all these loyalty tests. By the way, so many people that I think are intelligent, knowledgeable, soft personnel or just analysts are failing these
Ex,
loyalty tests. It's like,
ex,
come on,
explain
guys.
that,
Give us
because
yeah.
explain our loyalty test. Because I think you said that yesterday to John and I, and I'm functionally retarded, so I actually, well, I don't know what a loyalty like.
What is that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like what
give
is
us an
it?
example.
Everybody right now really should go watch the first Godfather movie
Okay,
Hmm?
very carefully, right? When you are about to go into a mob war, because that's what we're doing, right? That's what we're doing. We're rooting out organized crime. That's the real enemy. The Devil's Legions were put in place in 1947 with a full-on, straight-up merger between the mob, organized crime, and the intelligence agencies
Hmm.
and the Nazis. And that's again not hyperbole. People can go look up Galen. They can go look up the Azovs. They can look at Operation
Reinhard, yeah,
Underworld and
Reinhard Galen.
all this stuff, right? It's all there. So and then that group killed a sitting president, Kennedy. And the elites realized, holy shit, we got to shut this down. Well, they tried. Eisenhower warned about it before. Kennedy tried. Nixon tried. They cooed him. Reagan tried. They shot him. He survived and backed off. And Trump, and his folks came in and they were going to go after it and they tried to kill him. First, they tried to coup him, just scare him away like they did Nixon. Didn't quite work. And then it was like, okay, well, we're going to have to Kennedy him.
And
Didn't
Nixon
work.
Nixon knew well. And what's his famous quote? They tried to do me like Jack,
Yeah,
or they wanted to do me like
they
Jack.
wanted to.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, well, so give me a second.
Very
So
good.
that's what we're really going after. That's who we're going to take down. The openly violent arm is the cartels and all that here. But so back to loyalty tests. The problem is with Operation Maxwell Epstein, and again, going back more to the Maxwell side of things, is that every level of government, from small little towns to counties to state to the federal, all the institutions, organizations, judges, sheriffs, police chiefs, fire departments, even, you know, um, corporations, banks at various levels, it's all infiltrated. That doesn't mean that there's all bad guys everywhere, not even close. But you only need about 1 to 3%, right? And then it can be spread out across. You only need about 1 to 3% for excuse me, for a
Good.
substantive conspiracy to work. And again, guys, I'm a trained Green Beret. What do they train Green Berets to do? Conspiracies, right? So, um, give me a second. So, what do you do if you don't know that you can trust your own security? You don't know that you can trust your own business partners. You don't know that you can trust that attorney. You don't know if you can trust that head of this department. You don't know if you know what I mean? There's
Uh,
all
it,
these things you don't
Oh yeah.
know
Oh
who
yeah.
somebody really is. And more importantly, it's not necessarily that they're set against you.
it's that they're
They
not.
might be under duress.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Like,
Our mutual friend Stoli once told me he's like it's better to have 100% of 50 of your men than a fraction of all of them. You do. You
yes,
when you're going balls to the wall, not some like, whatever, some low level thing. If you're going like nuts out, kill shot,
yeah, yeah.
it's better to be at that half capacity, but just have like true blue. Like,
This is a conversation for Clay and I today
yeah.
with Ben Keller, and
Sorry,
right
yeah. Keep
is
going.
yeah. So I want to this point. This is something else they teach us, right? Duress codes and duress signals. You guys are familiar with that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Hmm.
The loyalty test isn't always to see who aligns with what, who falls down in what, who's really maybe that's all there too. But sometimes it's to see who's under duress, who's making decisions that aren't in accord. Given this little, we probed with some informational thing like the Elon Trump fight, right? We probed to that, and there's got to be some truth to it, or nobody's going to believe it, right? Again, back to the Godfather movie, right? Luca Brasi, right? Go meet with Dahlia's or whoever it was, right? And tell them that you're unhappy with how the family's treating you. And it was legit. There was a little bit of um, sometimes you got to see how people align. You got to see what they say, what they do. The obvious ones are obvious. You probably already know them. That's not what and there's layers and layers of loyalty tests. And so sometimes you're trying to see who's being influenced and maybe not with their will, maybe they're fat. And so I'm going to give you an example. There was recently a judge who resigned down in Texas, and it was because some photos came out with him with a gangbanger cartel kid living at his house.
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that judge was doing that willingly. If I
Mm.
was the cartels and I wanted to have a judge, I would do something like that. He had a daughter,
Just for
Right.
PR or to have a little hitman in their house.
in-house hitman.
Yeah.
Let me give you guys an example because
Don't even send out a tweet.
now that you're describing it, it's like it's hitting me. It's like I'm having the epiphanies now that you've laid it out. After the Butler shooting, Dan Bongino is like, there's no evidence of a second shooter. That's the loyalty test right there. He's
Oh.
demonstrating the loyalty despite what might actually be going on. He's demonstrating, I'm going to be loyal to you, sir, no matter what.
Yes.
You can trust me.
To
Yes.
Trump.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what happens? He gets
If you tell
deputy
me
director.
if
He's
you
number
if,
two of the
if you
FBI.
tell me to come out and say, Santa Claus did it, I'll do it. They're gonna call me a fucking faggot
But
and
I'm
drop
not an
me.
idiot and I'm not stupid and I'm not going to help you do something that's fraudulent, genuinely a fraud to the American people. But if we got to play a game to draw out some disloyal people in the FBI or in the CIA or in the Joint Task Force, I'll play
He's
that game.
right.
And I know it very much what you're saying, Tommy. And I know I'm going to get vilified. I know I'm going to get called an idiot. I know people are going to turn on me that were loyal to me. But it
Cash
has to
Patel.
be done. Cash Patel's
Cash
the
Patel.
same thing. Pam Bondi, same thing. Again, order of operations, when you are undoing something that's been put in place over the last 60 years, in fact, going back 20 years or so before that, 80 years, 100 years, in this case, or directly organized, 1947 is when this was all formally set in motion. But again, it began in 1941, again, formally with Operation Underworld. And look at the correlations in Europe with the Catholic Church, et cetera. It's all tied together. So it's much older things, but this specific, right? And then the counter was set in motion in the 1960s, late 1960s, when they killed RFK. JFK was one thing, but then when they went and killed his brother, that was like, okay, we've got to do this. And then when they killed his son, left him at the bottom of the Hudson with, or the bottom of the water with the plane, and no noticeable problems with the plane, with he and his fiance and her best friend. These folks, the Trump, and where's Trump from? New York, right? Where was RFK Jr. or JFK Jr. living, and where was he going to run against, and who was he going to run against? Hillary freaking Clinton, right? So
and then Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s wife dies. She hangs herself. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, the other brother killed a woman in a car accident in Chappaquiddick.
Oh boy,
yeah, the ginger guy, the redhead.
Did he?
Ted. Yeah. Oh yeah. I will.
Right.
He didn't remember. He didn't remember what happened. Right. He was like,
well, it'd be some way I would control a Kennedy.
Let me interject from my own.
By the way, Kennedys, I'm not trying to control any of you. Just so you know.
For my own, but for my own like intellectual honesty, I always have to be honest with myself, and so this makes sense. But it's also, I ask myself, would I believe this if Biden was president right now? And I'd say no. This is copium. This is 5D chess. He's just a pedophile. So to address that, because that's whoever's in charge. So because Trump is in charge, I'm more of a conservative leaning guy. I'm much more receptive to what EM's saying. But if someone else was in charge, I would go, no, this is all bullshit. He's just a pedophile.
Because if somebody else was in charge, they'd be on the other side of this.
Okay, I can make the case. Let me make the case for you guys that Bobby Kennedy Jr., who's running Health and Human Services, is absolutely controlled, if not part of the whole operation.
Okay.
He was running for president, and along comes an ad fairy for the Super Bowl. Did you know about this? He didn't know who Nicole was.
Yeah.
Nicole Shanahan.
I don't know.
He had no idea who Nicole Shanahan was. Never heard of the woman.
I don't know who that is.
Nicole Shanahan produces and funds a $4 to $5 million commercial for Bobby Kennedy Jr. for president to run during the Super Bowl. And Bobby Kennedy's like, wow. And next thing you know, she's on his ticket as the vice president. She used to be married to Sergey Brin.
Oh.
They got divorced, and she ended up with, I don't know, 300 million, 400, whatever it was.
For everybody listening, Sergey Brin's the co-founder of Google.
All right, so she marries Sergey Brin, divorces Sergey Brin.
Yeah.
All right. And next thing you know, she funds this ad for Bobby Kennedy Jr. during the Super Bowl. And he's like, I had never even heard of this chick. I had no idea who she is. Next thing you know, she's on the ticket. Okay. They're running for president. And I have just figured out that Trump ordered the vaccines January 13th, 2020, when there's one guy dead from COVID. Meaning the vaccines are not for COVID, they're for this other thing. And I'm sharing all this with Bobby Kennedy and Nicole. And Nicole, nobody knows who Nicole Shanahan is. So when I'm sending her all this stuff, it's like I had more followers than she did. And I'm sending her all the stuff about the vaccines aren't for COVID. He ordered them January. All you have to do is say, Mr. President, why did you order the vaccines January 13th, 2020? And they would have nailed him to the wall. And instead, Bobby throws in the towel and joins the administration. It's like you just handed the guy the katana to decapitate the campaign.
Okay. But here's the thing. You don't go after the man because the man signed it. the reason they went for COVID and went through the department, DHS and DIA or DHA, Defense Health Agency, et cetera. The reason they went through that vector is because nobody was paying attention to it.
Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food. 72 servings per pail, 25 years shelf life. I've had the owner Clayton on the show before. He's a God-fearing, America-loving patriot. Get one of these, get a couple of them, throw them in your basement. It's good to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it. If you don't want to do that, you can get their seeds. You can plant your own garden, so you don't even have to keep buying them. You can just get the goods and start your own, or you can even get freeze-dried fruits and vegetables like bananas, apples, strawberries, and raspberries. They support the show. It's an honest product. It's a good safety measure to have, and they keep my show free for you. So I'd implore you guys to please go to heavensharvest.com, use the link in the description, promo code TPC. Axios Fitness Coaching is a premium resource for holistic strength and conditioning services. Axios is best known for the Training Club, capital T, capital C, an exclusive community that prioritizes accountability, technique, diet, and nutrition. Everything you need to do to take action against the decay of the modern world. Whether you're looking to improve your physique, build strength, or just take care of your health and fitness, Axios will provide you with a solution that is effective and simple to execute. All you need to do is complete the intake survey, and you can see if you're a good candidate for the training club or any other of the services. And it's going to sponsor the show. So, one company falls off, another one arises. So if you guys like the show, you want to work out, throw the show a couple shekels. Go take the survey. Thank you so much, guys.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a Blue Room soon. www.blueroom.com.
Well, I'm talking about Bobby Jr. for a second. So I'm saying I think Bobby Jr. is.
Well, then
I think they killed his wife, and they said, "Dude,
I think so.
9 kids,
and his
you got
family,
9
et cetera,
kids, right?
But here's,
we'll take one out every year."
But I disagree with you on this one point. Okay.
Which one?
I agree with that what you just articulated, right?
Okay.
He's operating within an environment that his father and his uncle were killed, and
Right.
probably his nephew, and his other uncle was framed, and a whole lot of other family members.
I think they killed his wife.
I believe that's exactly the case. Give me a second.
You good?
At some point, I believe Bobby realized that he was being set up as president by the very people that had killed so many of his family,
Mm-hmm.
to set him up in president so that people would look away from the Kennedy father. So this whole, drawing out into the open of the intelligence community, and basically the devil's legions, as I call them now, which is this complete marrying of the illicit criminal organizations and the intelligence community. And anybody who does even a slight scratch of the surface will see that they're one and the same. I mean, remember Iran-Contra? What were we doing? Running cocaine to buy guns? Where we were running the cocaine into the United States, right? Which is what, Opium Wars 3.0.
Dark Alliance, Gary Wood.
Now we're at Opium Wars 4.0 with fentanyl, right? I believe that Bobby Kennedy was being set up as president as a way to mollify him, but really to mollify the boomers, see, we let a Kennedy become et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And at some point, to your point about having the katana where he could have, decapitated Trump, he had a conversation with Trump and realized that one, Trump had been set up.
Hmm.
What the hell did he know about health? What the hell did he know about this 30-year operation with 52 biolabs in Ukraine, et cetera? All that was being kept from him.
Absolutely.
So what the hell did he know? And at some point, a conversation was had, and again, most of the people who are the power behind all of this counter movement are all from New York and Boston, and they're all the old blue blood American families. And they were like, "We understand. We
Well, you
got
heard the
this."
story
Yeah.
where Bobby tells the story. He says, he flew on Trump's plane, but he was suing Trump,
Yeah.
and he was in the middle of a lawsuit, and his wife at the time, the one who ends up getting killed, said, "No, we'll fly down to Palm Beach on Donald Trump's plane." And he said, "But I'm in the middle of a lawsuit." And he said, "Yeah, it's okay. You can still use the
Yeah.
plane." And Bobby tells that story. So I think you're right. I think there's a certain public facing
Yes.
and to a
And it's
certain
legit. And it's legit.
well, to a certain extent,
Yeah.
though, I was wondering about this thing with Elon and Trump, where Elon says, "Well, he's in the list." But we knew this already. It's like, well, we kind of knew Donald Trump flew on the plane, but
So that
from Teterboro to Palm Beach, it's like that was not news. What
and he threw him out
Elon
of
broke,
Mar-a-Lago and banned him and all of his close network and
right? So it
right.
was
So
like,
again, guilt by association that we were talking about
right,
earlier.
right, right,
Yeah. And when you're doing big deals, these people, they're there. They're there with cash. They're there with money. They're there with lawyers. They're there with, hey, I've got leverage on this other person on the other side of this, $3 billion deal that went bad, or, you know,
I
it's
think
the way
so.
they play,
I think
right?
SpaceX is just too strategic right now, too important for us to be screwing with Elon Musk. And so it strikes me that whatever these guys, it seems like it's a
I think
play. It's wrestling. It's like a wrestling match.
I think it's a threat against both the Democratic and the entrenched Democrats and Republicans. So
Okay.
all that Maxwell Epstein infrastructure that's in place across government in the political parties at every level across the country, right? We all focus on the federal level and we need to stop because there's no real power at the federal. That's an accumulation of power at the local levels. Everything happens locally. So my belief is this alternate party with the wealthiest people in the world, the most connected people in the world, the people who built the infrastructure, understand the modern infrastructure, is a genuine threat of we will take your power from you by providing a genuine alternative. I think it's a threat, and it comes out of the fact that they went and found all these, savings and all these programs and all this stuff, and
Right,
Congress wouldn't do fuck all about it.
right, right.
Congress said, no, 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 this is Congress. We do what we want to do.
So to an extent, they're exposing and burning some of these networks through this process. They've now
Yes,
exposed. Well, why wouldn't you want to get rid of?
loyalties,
Right, right. So all this is getting
loyalties.
exposed and burned.
Yes,
And let's. I was going to say one, the whole depopulation scientist thing. That could be another episode. If that ties into was that what the vaccine was for, or was that a counter to that? Is it even some
no, it
higher
was
level
what it
shit?
was for.
Okay, okay,
The COVID itself was never the disease.
sure,
Because
sure.
here's the thing: you don't modify a disease that could actually run away because you and your kids could get killed by
Oh,
it.
I've had Dr. Ken Albeck on here. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Not I was just putting that as an aside, and
Mm.
then before I derailed the conversation 20 minutes ago, and I said, if someone else was doing this, I would say they're a pedophile. I don't want to call it 5D chess. Normally, I don't give a shit with a show. I don't care where it goes, but I do kind of want, and I think it just naturally tied back into what you were just saying, exposing to loyalty tests. I know I
Loyalty
completely
tests.
derailed that, and
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
apologize, but
No, no, no. It's all good
loyalty tests, yeah.
conversations. Yeah, yeah. So loyalty tests are way more. So I think it was all an aside. Loyalty tests are way more sophisticated and complex. And the loyalty test about Bobby joining Trump's team and having a major role in it was by Trump and his team passing Bobby's loyalty test as to will you do this, right? And will you secure me and my family while you're doing this? probably for the rest of our lives. And on the other side was loyalty from Bobby, that Bobby would join the team, fully join the team, and would take everything that he knows, going all the way back to when he was a kid, and bring that to them so that they could go right. And another thing is you don't just do one loyalty test. You got to, you got to, and it's the same thing with Green Berets when we're doing unconventional warfare. You got to loyalty test to people because you never know when you're going to get a green on blue incident because you didn't loyalty test and one of your guys has been compromised. And then he kills 19 of your people in the dark one night because they got his family somewhere. And all the little signs were there, but you weren't listening. You weren't doing these little probes to see. They can't tell you directly because if they do, the family gets offed. But they can give you little signs if you probe them and test them right. And then you can pick up on that and go, okay, there's a problem there. I don't know exactly what it is. Hey, you guys, somebody at lunch or dinner in the hallway somewhere where it's quiet is that I need you to go look at this. Don't report to me. Go report to somebody, right?
You were talking earlier about the infiltration of the community, and that if that's at just like a 1% level,
Correct.
it can be effective. And
Yeah,
one of the things
correct.
I've been exploring is the extent to which the government employs disinformation people, undercover operatives.
Yeah.
The Pentagon has 60,000 people in the signature reduction program.
SRA, yeah.
So here's what we have to look at with respect to what you're saying. I don't mean to interrupt, but just to give you, in this case, it's not so much about 1% manpower, but what percentage of the actual informational budget. And it's way more than 1%.
So I'm
So if
getting
you
it in the
take-
community. You talked about, like, for example, the guy at the pizza place
Yeah.
is really with, he's, and the librarian at the local library
Correct.
who's watching who's reading what and who's
Correct.
checking out what.
Correct.
And I
And
don't,
the off-duty cop who meets us at the bar and we have a pint every other night or
right. I think people don't understand the degree to which society has been infiltrated. So, for example, working on Wall Street, I think I met quite a few people over the course of the years that were working on Wall Street, working in IT
large
on Wall
number.
Street,
It's a
who
large
have
number.
access to the back end systems, have access to what's really happening. When you start to see what's really happening, like you were saying earlier about the fraud stuff that you were investigating, I was in the IT side of things, working at Hewlett Packard, working at Oracle. It's like, what are you kidding me? When you guys, you're issuing a quarterly report every 90 days? There's no way what your revenues and what your expenses were in that 90. You're completely, not completely fabricating it, but the fact that they sign their names to this stuff used to boggle my mind, knowing what's going on behind the scenes. It's like a
read the
sausage factory.
assumptions, right? You got to read
Oh
the
my
assumptions, that tiny
God.
little print at the end of the thing. And when you read the assumptions, you're like, well, none of that actually has
Right.
any meaning whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah.
Our degree of confidence is 1% plus or minus.
Exactly. Pretty much.
Yeah, what?
Yeah. But my confidence is 85% you're going to fall for it.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what that's kind of what matters.
So I think what's happening though now is there's a new awareness of sort of this lack of credulity, meaning there's a whole bunch of people on X or accounts on X that appear to be, trying to get to the truth or what have you, that are actually disinformation people that are sort of like Pied Pipers trying to get more attention on the red herring than on what's actually happening.
I want to pause there for a moment, okay? Because I think this is a very critical piece
Illuminati
of where we are.
Sorry, Illuminati
Most
bot
of
is
that-
like the worst one.
But there's a dozen of them, 2 dozen of them.
But most people mostly know now that the problem is that most of that work is already done because it's embedded in the large language models behind ChatGPT and Grok and et cetera. So most of that damage is done. And now everybody's critical and people are just blocking these things. People are calling it out, et cetera. The problem is that the damage is already done. And now I'm hearing people I do know and I do respect and I know are being intellectually honest. The problem is their sense of reality of certain things is based off of things that are artificial 5 years ago. right? They
Yes.
were created, fed in over a 3 to 5 year period. And a lot of it is when these guys were in the military or the intelligence world, et cetera, and their reality was crafted. And so now they're honest. This is what, when a system is about ready to go for its all out abuse, theft, murder, et cetera,
Mhm.
um, again, just like The Godfather, right before the real conflagration, you don't lie because people are going to pick up on that. That's not quite true. And then they're not going to trust you, but you need them to go do what you need them to do.
So interesting you said this. This is wild you just said this.
The lies have already happened, right? That set the
Yeah, right,
stage. Yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah.
And all of a sudden, they start telling that, okay,
Yeah.
just today, at a couple hours before we started recording this, one of the guys that I've been kind of working with who does a lot of research with me, he goes by Bubba's Lamb Chop Shop, finds a video that came out in August, so less than a year ago, about this H7N9 bird flu that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have proposed is what was really the pandemic, and that the vaccines were actually for H7N9, not for COVID. And there's this video from the New England Journal of Medicine talking to Dr. Fauci about it. It was published in August, but the interview took place in 2013.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they're telling the truth
Yes.
now.
Yes.
11 years later, they
Yes.
decide, okay, now this plugs right into what you just said. Now, towards the end of the game, now they can't tell the lie,
Because
and
you'll pick up
they
that
did,
it's a lie and that you
and
won't go do what
yes,
they tell you to do next.
they did the same thing with the asteroid story. I did
Yes.
an
Yes.
asteroid podcast with Nicola Charles in Australia. She's like the Susan Lucci of Australia. She's the soap opera queen of Australia.
Mm-mm.
And so I did a podcast with her talking about the asteroids. 10 days later, Australian 60 Minutes does an asteroid story that they recorded in 2011. It's like, why are you guys publishing this 23 years later? Now you're putting this on the air? 10 days after we just did this whole thing on the asteroids, now because they've been caught. And this is exactly what you're describing, EM. They're now showing you, well, here's some of the true stuff. They now will have some degree of, no, we talked about that.
Okay, so very good. So that piece you just made. Oh yeah, no, we mentioned that. Okay. I'm going to put something forward, especially for your specific type of mind, right? Neurological mind, that I've been trying to figure out how to model, and I've been doing different models and I haven't been able to quite get it, but my long time experience and intuition tells me this is absolutely right. The reason in which the whole concept of conspiracies gets debunked so many, gets vilified, et cetera, is that the way in which conspiracies actually work, and I know this from operational stuff, is that you're never dictating what the outcome's going to be. You've got an end state you're trying to get to that's going to set other things in motion. Then you have a primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency plan for that. Depending on, primary is, okay, if things mostly go the way we planned, they're going to go here. Alternate is, okay, here's some things that changed or substantive, but we're still going to kind of get there. Contingencies, no, if things have changed substantively, we're not going to get there. We're going to end up somewhere else, but maybe over here somewhere. And then emergency is, holy shit, everything's gone fucking wrong. We got to survive and get the hell out of here. Anybody who's doing any of these types of major things does a PACE plan. And I've written an article on PACE plans. It's up on X and LinkedIn, et cetera. When I look at history, very few times do I see that a specific end state was planned, articulated, and then achieved. What I do see a lot of is that things are articulated across the whole spectrum of things. And then as time goes along, they bring up something that's in support of their either telling you about it, articulating that it was going to happen, or articulating that they were the ones behind it. They're not. They didn't make it happen. They didn't drive it happen. They just looked ahead and said, well, here's the things that could probably happen. Here's the things we're doing. Here's where things might go. And later we want to take credit for that. And it's most of what I see. And so what do? You're constantly creating content. You're constantly creating narratives. You're constant because you don't know exactly which one's going to happen because life and the universe and humanity is very messy and very complicated and dependencies upon dependencies upon dependencies. And so very rarely, but the problem is when they do that across time, across any kind of sufficiency of time, the entire concept and sense of reality is warped. And they can take credit, either I told you so, or hey, we did that, for pretty much anything. And I'll give you an example, right? When you and I were young, Tommy probably wasn't born yet, the little whippersnapper, right? But when you and I were young, on the cover of Popular Science was talking about the coming ice age.
Yeah.
Right? And it was on National Geographic. It was okay. And then it went to global warming and et cetera. Well, then it switched to climate change. Why? Because the planet kind of stopped warming. We started to get the ice caps back, and it looks more like what they were saying back in the late 70s and early 80s is probably closer to the truth. And now we know a lot more about Milankovitch cycles and all this other stuff. So what tells me that we're actually heading into an ice age and not, the interglacial period is coming to an end, which happens every 12 to 30,000 years, right? And we're 12,000 or so years into this one. The surest sign that the actual real science is telling us we're heading into the end of an interglacial period back into glaciation is that the British government comes out and say they're researching technologies to blot out the sun to deal with climate change. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is putting a story out there so that later, if it goes from, this whole global warming argument and story and climate change, and it goes to actually into an, return of glaciation, they can take fucking credit for it.
You've got the movie Don't Look Up, which they brought in Meryl Streep, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah, you said that before. Yeah,
Jonah Hill.
Yeah.
And 3.5 years from now, right, and to make fun of the whole thing. I mean, it's basically like a send-up. And, Jonah Hill plays an extraordinarily gay assistant to the president and really, an unlikable guy. And this is all going to take place in 3.5 years. So in April 2029, it happens for real. And they've set the table. They've absolutely set the table, and they've done so in a manner. And this is the thing
if it goes that way, though, and if it doesn't, then they can play it off and go, "Well, it was just a comedy."
Right, exactly. So they can play either side of the street. They can play either side of the street.
Yeah.
But it was something we talked about, I think, the last time we were together, which is it's this collective experience. Meaning, again, you and I are at a stage in life now where we've come to realize basically all we have are our memories.
Yes.
That's all there is. In other words, each day you wake up, I don't do anything. I just sit around the house and watch The Price is Right all day. You have a life that doesn't have many memories.
Yeah.
The shit we do, right? When you go do something that makes these memories, when you travel, the activities that you do, these are the things we remember.
Yeah.
Movies are like a shared experience, meaning if the three of us went shooting the rapids in Uzbekistan down one of the craziest rivers in life, and we saw all kinds of wild animals and we had to kill a bear, it would be this shared experience that the three of us had that we would never forget, right? For the rest of our lives, we'd never forget that. That's what seeing a movie is almost like, because we all saw The Godfather. And we all remember when Luca Brasi go. So it's this shared experience as if we were together.
Yeah.
Langley realized this a long time ago.
Well, they helped create.
We can plant shared memories using George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Sean Connery, and now as soon as I refer to a scene, everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about. Michael Madsen in Reservoir Dogs. everybody, the straight
And
razor, the gasoline,
here's what you do. You're putting out movies that are giving you the primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency
there you
plans
go. There you
for a
go.
period of for a 3 to 5 year period of time, so that no matter what happens, you'll be able to match it to one of those movies. And more importantly, there's academic papers that come out that do this as well. There's research papers, there's government reports, all of the, think tank stuff. If you actually sit down, I'm a nerdy kind of guy, a dork, I guess. Lovely Chinese lady said I'm not a nerd, I'm a dork. And she had to explain the difference to me. I'm grateful she did. Um, I used to sit down and read research papers, 4, 5, 10 of them a day across the whole broad spectrum of fields. And when you're reading them, you realize these things all conflict with one another. Even if they reference back to the same, some of the same source material, et cetera, and some of it going back, 50, 60, 80 years to fundamental breakthroughs, all conflicts with one another. But then you get older, and I'm 20 some odd, 30 years on, I'm like, oh, they were laying all this stuff out there so that if it went down this pathway, well, see, we got the papers and we told you this, we knew it, we modeled it. If it went down this pathway, oh, here it is, right? They don't know what they're doing. They're not in control. What they are in control of and what they're very good at is all of this multivariant narrative crafting so that no matter where it goes, they can take credit for it.
You also said something earlier about how people get paid.
Yeah,
And if you can
incentive
control how
structures.
people and if you can
Yeah,
control how people get paid, one of the things that we witnessed during COVID was certain experts in the field
yeah,
were
yeah,
coming forward with positions that a lot of their peers are like, "What the hell are you talking?"
yeah.
All right. So a perfect example is a guy named Michael Warraby, and Warraby is a pretty well-known guy, and he's funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And so in other words, here's a guy, he's married, he's probably got 3 kids, right? Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is funding his research.
Yeah. This is what Epstein did a lot of too, by the
That's
way.
exactly right. This is exactly right.
And Maxwell, yeah.
Now, if you're
did.
dependent, he's committing, he's going to invest 20 million a year into your research. You go hire a whole bunch of lab technicians, mortgage a whole bunch of equipment.
Yeah. So John, so you hit on a very critical piece people need to understand about the Maxwell Epstein operation. And I call it that for a reason. Because again, Ghislaine Maxwell, it's probably why she's still alive, was way more important, way more pivotal in that operation. And it was the extension of her father's operation, working with Steve Cohen, working with the New York power, the families, all of it, the Dulles brothers, all of it. All right. Help create the Mossad, help create his, all this stuff, right? Okay. Maybe only 3%, and this is Diddy as well, by the way, maybe only 3% of the people are involved in pedophilia. The rest of them are, blackmail only works with certain people, and it also only works for so long. And particularly, it only works while people are not until their older dotage years. There's a long history of people in their old years suddenly getting their conscience back now that they're not in the game anymore and they're looking at death.
Sure.
That's why a lot of these people, they're aging, and then all of a sudden they die.
Will Casey, head of the CIA, didn't he have a lot
Right.
of guilt, and then they found him in a canoe?
So blackmail only works for certain type of people, and it only works for so long. The other ways you do it is all these incentive structures that you're articulating about. And there's people who are more motivated by fame. There are more people that are more motivated by money. There are people that are more motivated by recognition, which is separate from fame, like researchers or, some people are motivated by the type of project they work on, whether they're an attorney and they get into big tobacco and be a big mover in the anti-big tobacco or, so there's all these other ways through the foundations, nonprofits, academia, et cetera, fund research, whether it's small or major or large. And then you become, I've got 30 PhD students and they're at the top universities and I get a chair at Harvard. And so what people need to understand is that Operation Maxwell Epstein, or I'm a bureaucrat and I rise up in the system and I get a placing at a certain job that gives me influence and control in a certain way that I want it. or a judge and I get a certain, judgeship, federal judgeship, et cetera, or I want to be a sheriff somewhere. So there's all these other ways, the other 97%, 95, 97% of people that are still also controlled and owned that had nothing to do with the pedophilia. And this is the thing that concerns me. And this is also why you use the 1 to 3% that'll do the dirty, nasty shit. The people should be taken out and shot, quite honestly, because they're fucking predators. But you use them as a mask for all this other shit you're doing.
Right.
And the other, out of 100 people, there's 3 of those or 5 of those, and there's 95 to 97 of the others. And nobody's paying attention to them.
You said at the beginning of the show, you said there were 2 terms: cover for this and
Action
cover for,
and cover for
action,
status.
cover status.
Okay, so
Cover for action, which is give yourself cover for what you're actually doing.
which is
Cover for
this. So the
status is why
pedophilia,
there you go.
everybody's caught up in the kids and the massages and all that, and
That's
is
a
not.
tiny,
Yeah, that's
tiny
the cover for action. That's the
It's
cover for action.
horrible and it's got to be
Yes.
dealt with, but it's a
Right.
fraction of what's going on. Yes. And by the way,
Yes.
might or might not teach that in the schoolhouse,
Understood.
right?
Amazing.
Right?
I think it's rampant, though. By the way, I think
Yes.
that
Yes.
so many people have said,
Yes.
"Look,"
And it goes back hundreds of years, by the way. This isn't anything new.
What?
and all of the agencies for all of the governments are most likely doing the same thing.
Correct.
Meaning, we've got German intelligence, there's French
Correct.
intelligence, there's
Correct.
Italian
Well, I want to
intelligence.
pause there. I want to pause there.
Okay.
When we
No
took
such thing as
Galen,
French intelligence. No such
Nope.
thing as French.
nope,
There is no
No.
French intelligence.
no,
Okay.
yeah.
But I'm done.
There's French arrogance.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's been
France
su-
is the
it's
only
been
place
such
I've
a-
lived and
It's
worked
been
where
such a
everybody
serious,
believed.
high-level conversation, and people are like, "The fuck?
Well,
There's some French guy like, what the fuck is this?"
France,
Some guy
France is
listening
the
in
only
Paris is
place
like,
I've
"Fuck these
lived and
guys."
worked where every
Right.
single person genuinely believed they're better than every other single person.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right? Yeah.
But
But there is
there's
no
gotta
such
be more,
thing
yeah.
as any of these individual intelligence agencies. That's what World War II was about. Aside from theft of assets and recapitalizing a bankrupt system and, breaking down the boundaries between states and bringing about the Euro theft, the theft of the Commons Project, et cetera. When we stood up the CIA, the Five Eyes, we also sent Galen, Major General Galen, back to Germany as head of
Mhm.
German intelligence.
This I just set up the same thing you had in the Third Reich.
It was all
it's
the
like
Nazi
copy-paste.
network. It was
Yeah.
the entire Nazi intelligence network. What did we do with the Banderites? What did we do with, who become the Azovs? We left them in Ukraine as the intelligence networks for all of the Soviet Union. So and we wove all those together through Operation Gladio and Operation Underworld with the organized crime. They're all one entity and organization. This is the Praetorians I talk about. They are exactly the Praetorians as in Rome, and they control by owning your security, by owning
pivotal.
intelligence, by doing these types of operations where they compromise all kinds of people.
How pivotal was Cuba and the investments that Sam Giancana, who was the Jewish mafia guy? What was his name?
Meyer Lansky.
Meyer
Meyer
Lansky.
Lansky is one of the architects of all this, by the way.
All right, so you got Meyer Lansky, Sam Giancana. These guys had invested in Cuba. They were trying to turn Cuba into Vegas 2.0, Vegas with a beach. They were building hotels everywhere. And
You know what the Soviets said? The Soviets said no.
Soviets were not into this.
Soviets, you're not going to do that. So, right?
And Kennedy's going to shut it down, and Khrushchev and all this stuff gets involved, right? We get the Cuban Missile Crisis,
which is all a cover for,
But Meyer Lansky and Sam Giancana are facing losses back then in the tens of millions of dollars. I mean, that had to be motivational for these guys. I mean, at some point, Dulles has got to go to them and say, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? I mean, is that how this works?
Dulles, no. Dulles worked directly with them.
Straight
Gotta
on.
look at, no. Alan Dulles and his brother stood the Devil's Legions up. They stood the Five Eyes up. And who were they doing it for originally in the 1930s before 1941 operation, before the OSS was created, et cetera? They were laundering Nazi money through Wall Street. That's public knowledge.
Wow.
Alan Dulles was Hitler's banker. Not directly, a couple layers removed. The whole World War II was stood up and created to break all the European powers, bring them all under the same umbrella, bring all, create one massive intelligence Praetorian system that was in control, and to steal everything that could be stolen, right down to the gold in millions of people's teeth, so that they could recapitalize the bankrupt system.
So with Snowden's revelations that Obama was listening to Angela Merkel's phone calls and stuff like that, is that also, to a degree, was that a head fake? I mean, or were they genuinely pissed off? I mean, was Angela Merkel like, what are you doing? I mean, I'd have been pissed off.
I don't think they were listening to Merkel at all, because she's owned and controlled. She's been owned and controlled since her days in Eastern
As a kid.
Eastern Germany.
Yeah.
She's owned and controlled. She was placed in that position. They were listening to who was on the other side of the coal.
There you go. There you go.
Right? It's the same, the Five Eyes listened up. You're right. The way in which the Five Eyes are set up and the rules and laws are set up, the British can't spy on the British, they say.
Right,
the Americans can, the Australians can, the Canadians can.
And if you're an American in Thailand, they can.
Yeah. Hey guys, I can't look behind me. Can you guys tell me what's on the screen behind me?
Exactly. Exactly.
You live to see another day.
Yeah. So again, what Operation Maxwell Epstein is, and this goes way back before the diddling of kids and the island and all of that. This all goes back to the to the 1920s, actually. And I'm gonna put it in this context. And I'd love to see your mind chase this down, right? Prohibition broke the US economy. Because they learned that you could make vastly more, the banks learned that you could make vastly more money off of illicit trade and by knowing how to launder that money. And you didn't have to have the intelligence to be a local regional banker and really, because it's complex to be a real banker.
The first crypto. It was the first offline. It was the first offline.
Al Capone coin.
And what they realized is, and then you could buy politicians, you could buy judges, you could buy the whole system. And the banks were like, all we got to do is launder money. We don't have to have business intelligence. And all you need is enough of an illusion of an actual economy to keep it all going.
And who's moving all the liquor? The Kennedys. The Kennedys are moving the liquor.
I went to elementary school with Al Capone's great-grandson.
What's that?
Say that again?
I went to elementary school with Al Capone's great-grandson.
Oh,
New Hampshire, yeah.
Yeah. So this is, who was the guy who was the big brain that rose out of that and made all that happen? It was Meyer Lansky.
And Joe Kennedy.
But Joe Kennedy stopped at one point. When Prohibition was over, Joe Kennedy stopped.
Yeah.
Right? He said, no. Well, no, he did.
I know. He did. Yeah, he did. He didn't return the money.
Well, they also killed. Well,
right.
Right? Prohibition was stupid anyways. That was a bunch of estrogens.
No. But for objective facts, no, he took that money, and then there's a lot of, and the mob helped him get elected in Chicago, right?
And then what they realized, though, with the Kennedy family, which is an old family, and they are blue blood family, they are patrician family, and when they realized what was really happening, they went to war with it, and they lost 2 of their sons, and they lost members of their family, and they've been owned and controlled ever since. That's the last time an American princely family stood up. The next one that stood up was Trump. And make no mistake, Trump is a prince. The Trump family is a princely family. Now they're newer then, right? But this is the first time a princely family stood up to this regime that goes all the way back to 1919, 1920s, etc.
I can keep going. I want to be fair to give John an out because it's 90 minutes. And I know you said beforehand. If you want to go, you can go. We can absolutely keep going. I just wanted to give you a fair out. I don't want you to be held hostage.
I'm fascinated by the conversation.
So I have a question for you, John. I have a question for you, right? how do we, using your kind of thought work, the kind of neat detail digging in, how do we start highlighting all the Maxwell Epstein related things that weren't the Epstein Island and the Epstein plane, et cetera,
The unknown
Yeah.
unknowns.
that are really with all the loyalty tests that are happening in all these different ways is trying to pump out that network. It's trying to get that network and all of its complexities around the world and here at home to show itself. The
It's just like
loyalties.
yeah. So it's just like Vegas.
Yes. Well,
That's
Vegas
just
is
how
tied
weird.
into
Right.
it. Vegas
Well,
is,
it'll sound weird to people like, huh? How the hell is that like
yeah,
Las Vegas? So when I was studying Las Vegas shooting, one of the things you have to do is kind of shut out all the noise. You have to not look at everybody screaming
yeah,
and
yeah,
running
yeah,
and
yeah,
hollering,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you're focusing on the sky and you're looking for muzzle flash coming from nowhere. It's the same thing with this. It's ignoring Epstein Island. It's
Yes.
ignoring
Yes.
the black
Plane.
book. It's
Yeah.
ignoring the flight logs. It's ignoring the massage. It's ignoring what's going on with Pam Bondi and all that, and doing the baseline. The baseline is going back to 2000 to 1990, pre Lex Wexner. Before that,
Yeah.
and understanding. So it's going to be the network, and it's going to be. So, for example, we learned a little bit more about Bill Gates' connection in that he came clean in the divorce. That was kind of an aspect of it. Was his connection with Epstein was an issue.
Depop. And in
Yeah,
particular with his wife, the depopulation part, his wife was not going for that.
and I wouldn't be surprised if his kids showed mom some of the videos of dad saying, "Yeah, we just stick it in the arm, stick it in the arm." The kids showing mom, "Is that dad really? Or was that AI?" And she's probably going, "Yeah, no, that's your father. He's a little crazy." So I think
An
that
autist gone bad.
oh yeah, no, he's worse than me. So the net of this here is setting aside the distraction.
Yes. Yeah.
Same thing with COVID. It's like you
Yeah.
got to ignore anything about SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah.
Everything that comes from David Martin is bullshit. That's all. That's all red herring stuff. Set that aside, and then getting into the investment aspect, the money, right? So who was he?
Yes. The
What
laundering.
projects? The science? Who was he?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what was Nathan Myhrvold? Nathan Myhrvold wasn't there for the blonde-haired chicks. Nathan Myhrvold is a brainiac guy. He's there to. He's fascinated with something. These guys are doing genetic stuff out in Zorro Ranch. Like
Same
what?
with Stephen Hawking's.
Yeah, exactly. So Stephen, come on. I did hear though that Stephen Hawking is a bit of a perv in the wheelchair.
If you
Like,
were locked in that chair
yeah,
for
I mean,
yeah,
listen, I don't even fault him,
Yeah.
man. You're stuck in there.
exactly.
They said he could
exactly.
do. They said he could do astrophysics
not
calculations.
to not to excuse, right?
No, not
But
I'll tell
pedophilia.
you
But
what.
if he can do
Yeah.
astrophysics calculations in his head, he can fucking undress a
Dude.
lot of women in his head too. Just,
I don't know if you read A Brief History of Time.
Mm.
It is so easy to read. The guy, and he's writing it with his frickin' tongue,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah, his
like,
eye movement.
dude,
hey
oh
man,
my
sometimes
god,
maybe you just need a
So-
vice. I get it.
he's so good.
Not
I
kids,
mean,
not kids, but I get if he's a
Yeah.
sex hound. Yeah, I mean, hey.
Yeah.
So let me give you another piece. This comes out, this whole, whatever the hell this kerfluffle is all day today about, there is no Epstein list. One, there's no
right.
signature on those documents. They're not formatted properly. And it came out
Yeah.
Sunday. You want to know what else came out yesterday?
Yeah.
The BRICS Declaration.
Interesting.
Isn't there a huge Secret Service global cryptocurrency operation going on right now? Or is
Could
that
be
the
as
same?
well. I know there's going after the illicit network stuff's going on right now.
I think it was
Secret
announced
Service
yesterday.
drives that. But what really came out yesterday was the BRICS Declaration. And it's got some stunners in it.
Okay.
And so the timing of this whole Epstein thing and the BRICS thing, which is real power, this isn't
Yeah.
to be taken lightly. This is real power. Really strikes me as because all of the people all of the quote unquote analyst guys that I know, and some of them are just smart guys and guys with some experience who should be talking about what was formally declared out of BRICS yesterday, are all talking about this Epstein thing today.
Perfect. It's a red herring.
It's a red herring.
Gotta love it. And they're never going to disclose any of it anyway because they would lose
Trust
whatever
it.
leverage they have
Well,
anyway.
I don't think it's that. I think the reason, one, because we can't trust, it could have been
Okay.
doctored and created, and
Right.
so, but I wrote about this earlier today a couple times, but you have to undo World War III capabilities by burning all those. You got to go after the illicit funding networks so they can't use that in a civil war. You got to go after their terrorist hitmen, so the cartels and the drugs and all of this, so that you don't have
It's too
that
valuable.
So in order to go, I don't trust anything that comes out about an Epstein list. I'm
Right.
just not going to. There's no way
But it's
possible.
also understandable. The way you're describing it, it almost makes it understandable. In other words, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel would have more credibility if they simply said, listen, guys, there's so much here. We can't tell you because
And
there's so many people to catch.
we're undoing things, right?
Right.
We're undoing
Right.
things. And
So
here's
we
the thing,
can't tell
though.
you. Can't
If
tell you what
we
we're doing.
look, the network, the Maxwell Epstein network, and all the capabilities has been put in place all the way back to her father, all the way back to World War II. It's all being undone. And that,
They would have the support of the people.
quite
Everybody would be
frankly,
thrilled.
the primest example of that is the BRICS declaration yesterday, where 80% of the world's population laid out very declarative statements and very structured, very organized statements that we're not playing this game anymore.
And that for those of you who haven't been following, that threatens the petrodollar. If all of a sudden,
Everything.
so if these countries agree, we're going to conduct commerce, and the dollar has nothing to do with this anymore.
It goes way
Out of the
beyond that.
picture.
Goes way beyond that. What it is you are not going to be able to use this covert, clandestine, devil's legion power anymore to control us. We've already thrown you out of Russia. It took us 20 years. Post-Soviet, Russia. China's been doing it since right? China's been doing it with under Xi since 2012. They've thrown us out of there. Iran, Persia, now the last remnants of the Devil's Legions just highlighted itself in this, decapitation strike, which failed to kill Khomeini, right? And now they're being removed out of, and for all intents and purposes, Central Asia, right? So what's happened now, they haven't quite removed them from Brazil yet and some of these other places. But what happened yesterday with the BRICS declaration is all of this Maxwell Epstein infrastructure that's been put in place around the world over the last 60, 80 years is now no longer, you're not going to be able to use that against us. The economic piece of BRICS is important, but it pales in comparison to this.
Okay. This is big. This is big. I'm going to have to dig into BRICS now today. I got to go read all the BRICS.
We'll dig into BRICS as a counter to the Maxwell Epstein infrastructure operations.
Understood. Yeah. It's all going to be about baselining. It always comes back to how did it begin? How did it start? How did it ramp up?
Who benefits from
it? Right. And then how did it start to hockey stick? Who were the key contributors? What were the key projects? Where was the research really going on? That's going to be the real story. And as you've helped everybody, I think, understand here, the sex part of the story, the untoward stuff, that's the cover.
Action and status. It's the cover.
That's it. That's the
real
cover.
mission was the theft of the commons, steal the great taking, but on a whole other level, and then massive depopulation to lock in the theft. And then covering all that and hiding all that in World War III, which might actually hopefully also bring down Russia or some other these parts of the world that have natural resources that you could steal as well. And all this goes back to the 1960s with, why did, I can't remember his name, but, the population bomb and, the whole Malthusian fear thing that was fed into the boomer generation from the time they were young. We're seeing that's what all of this was really about. Steal absolutely everything that could be stolen from as many generations as possible in the future, then kill off massive, 90% of the population so that they can't, undo the steal and then bury all of it and hide all of it under the World War so you kill off the rest.
At least Trump is straight up about it. He's like, yeah, we want all your magnets, all your rare earth. We're taking it. We're taking it. You owe us.
He said it knowing that they weren't going to be able to do it.
Right. Well,
Because what's it do? It draws out the bankers. It draws out all it's a loyalty test. Had
Interesting.
nothing to do with
Interesting.
Ukraine. It was who were the
Interesting.
ones that were going to come out of the woodworks and salivating over this
Right.
when knowing
Lindsey Graham.
there's no way impossible for that to happen unless we went to open war with
And
Russia.
did you see how? Right? Did you see
we
how
couldn't
Putin
win.
played it? Did you see how Putin played it?
Yeah.
Putin said, "What are you kidding? Ukraine is tiny."
Yeah.
He says, "You want rare earth?
Come
You
to
come
us
to Russia.
at
Come
a
to
good
Russia."
price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to set up a mine? You come here. You're rare earth. They got nothing.
You got the coin, Kajit's
You
got the
come here. You
wares.
come, I'll partner with you. He says, "You come here. We'll set up a mine here in Russia."
Exactly.
The guy is so good.
Well, that's the other thing, right? The other thing
He
is
is
that
good.
we are in a position right now where the top 5 leaders, well, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Kind of
at
feckless.
least 4 of the world's top leaders don't even have to talk to each other because they know what they're saying.
Yeah.
And they don't, and very much what you're saying, they don't pay attention to this and this. And that guy Trump tweeted something. Do you think Putin gets upset about that or goes, no, he's like, he knows that Trump's playing to the US, British, European
Absolutely.
audience. He's playing to the intelligence community, the assassins, right?
No, and
Same
for
with
the
Xi, same with
you were talking about-
Cullen.
and you were talking about Angela Merkel before. I mean, I've seen the photos of Angela Merkel as a kid. She's like 12 or 13 in the little school outfit with a whole bunch of other world leaders as kids.
Yeah.
So I mean, like you said, they're farming these world leaders,
and they tend to do it in these private schools, unfortunately.
Yes, the
and
Daltons.
that's something that has to end. Yeah.
Switzerland. They come out of Switzerland. A lot of them. There's some private
mother
schools there.
Was broken, and my mother went to private schools in Switzerland, Stade, and my mother came out of that period broken.
Sorbonne, right?
Le Sorbonne, Eton in UK, and other private schools.
Then if you want to find the high-end spooks, you go to St. Andrews, right? So St. Andrews in Scotland, where the golf was born. That's the
Where
top.
did James Bond come from?
Where from? From St. Andrews? There you go.
And he was a Bond. He went to all the private schools. And his parents died.
Indeed. Right.
What did they say? One of the, what is it? I can't remember which one.
Skyfall?
It is, one of the, I love Skyfall, but I think one of the other movies where somebody says the orphans always make the best.
Of course. It's M. I think M says that.
Yeah, M says it,
make the best agents, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I can't thank you guys enough. This has been illuminating in a major way.
Mind melting. It's
it's burned my hair off over the decades, just like yours, John.
It'll get me next. Yeah,
I'm excited to dig into this a little bit more now and start to figure out what were these guys really up to? Who was behind the money? Again, I think the Lex Wexner thing is another red herring. I'm sure he had money in this thing, but he's just a name people know. He's just so people can say, right, that's it. That's what they want to hear.
Every once in a while, you got to burn one of your own, and you got to distract everybody over there. It's still cover.
Right.
Yeah,
I want to find who else was in this thing.
It's scandalous. It's Victoria's Secret. He gives Epstein a $57 million penthouse. It's got all those weird paintings in it. It was wired for surveillance, two-way mirrors, totally normal penthouse.
Well, and if there is this...
I don't trust lingerie.
Well, there's a whole... Right.
That's why I do every show without pants. You guys don't know, but...
Indeed. But there's a lot there. There's a lot to explore, and I will be digging into some of this. So we'll do some more.
Very much appreciate to see where your mind takes it.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Just
so much, Tommy.
And not that you've insinuated otherwise, but just to clarify, when I opened and said, John, you're weaponized autism, I hope you know I mean that as the greatest compliment. As a
dude, I refer to myself as retarded.
Clinical OCD crazy person. Yeah. I say
you're
that
the Rezhnik.
I say that with love
of autists.
Yeah, I say that with
retarded.
I say that with love and admiration, not an insult.
Oh, it's all good.
I strive,
dude. The fastest man in the world is highly autistic. His name is Max Park. And Max Park solved the Rubik's Cube in 3.12 seconds.
Yeah, no, it's a superpower.
Yeah, I mean, there's shit we can do that
and
people don't have this neuropathy type, this stuff that we've got, whatever it is. we just see things other people don't see. It's just weird. I don't know.
I
It's
think
like,
it's what Frank Herbert was talking about when he talked about mentats. I think this is what he was, mentats in the Dune series. I think that's
I'm
what.
not familiar with it.
Oh, I would
Uh-huh.
highly look at it. Don't the movie doesn't do a good,
Yeah, no, the books.
right?
Yeah,
But the
yeah, yeah.
book,
Yeah, the
I
books,
believe that this is what Frank Herbert was talking about, was
I'll have to
about
read it.
mentats. After the AI wars, the Butlerian jihad, where they ban all human thinking machines, and then they have humans that they train specially to, high computational capabilities. I think it was Herbert's way of articulating this unique capability amongst some human beings to just process vast amounts of information and then make it presentable to others.
I think it's an evolutionary,
I
not
agree.
side effect. I think, yeah, like the meta system. I think that there's probably some level of technological advancement or longevity marker where the biosphere writ large starts to produce higher numbers of people with these crazy pattern recognition because they have to in a population that's grown
As
so large.
complexity increase, yeah. So
It's
these types, so these would be folks that are in the skin of the balloon as the balloon's expanding.
yeah, and
Not
it's
on the inside because you can't keep up, but they're
yeah.
in the skin of the balloon as
And there's
it's
probably some
expanding.
weird epigenetic horizontal feedback
Uh,
mechanism where it doesn't, if the global population is 100,000, it probably doesn't care. Or there's some relative autism at that
yeah,
level
yeah.
versus once you get up to billions, there's probably some marker, some protein thing that's essentially like food. There goes my camera. Food, water, fucking, whatever the fuck. That camera gets too hot,
The
and then
Oh,
cat, the
turned
cat
off.
gets too
the
hot. The
camera gets too
Elgato.
hot, and then I have
Right.
to put
Well,
on a new one.
I
Well, there
think
it is.
Tommy's camera melting down is a good place to
That's
stop.
a good
Yeah, no,
sign.
there's the
There
other
you
one.
go.
Yeah, no, the good,
There you go.
the good one fucking
There you go.
shuts down when it gets to the hot temperature of 72.
So you
Fucking
need
There you
to.
go.
sack of
Well,
shit.
I start shutting down when it gets to like
Yeah, well,
72
you know what? I
degrees.
need a camera to fucking be a little stronger than that. So with that, Elgato, the company, is not sponsoring my show, so I can only assume that they've been compromised by
Exactly.
Maxwell Epstein operation worldwide. Meow.
Yeah.
So,
All right, guys.
gentlemen, thank you
Yeah.
both for your
Thank
time,
you
guys.
both.
Guys,
Thank you.
guys listening, watching, please go to the description. Please go follow them both on Twitter, both on YouTube, and John's Patreon and subscribe star. Fund the autism, and gentlemen, thank you
The
both.
weaponized autism.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All
Guys,
right,
you,
thank
guys.
you so much, guys. Thank you for
Cheers.
watching. Take care,
Yeah.
everybody.
Recording
God
stopped.
bless and peace.